On today's show, it is part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben Pfeifer talking all things NBA draft, number one overall pick, his favorite players, and more right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1745 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday here in late June. And I'll stop right here and just tell you this is part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben Pfeifer. So if you missed part 1, I recommend starting there. It should be available in this same podcast feed, and it's usually better to listen to the show in chronological order. So part 1 is available for you in your favorite podcast player, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. But that's kind of all I have to say at the top of the podcast, other than the fact that today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And also, please go ahead and subscribe. Make us your first listen on this podcast. Search Locked On Hawks anywhere you might find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. All right, with that out of the way, here we go with myself and Ben Pfeifer and part 2.
Have you seen the Michael Porter Jr. comparisons for him?
Yes, I have.
I know they're kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you, I think physically, like the back problem, current Michael Porter Jr., I kind of see it that. But Michael Porter Jr. was always a fantastic shooter. Like, and that's honestly, that's not why I brought that up earlier about Risacher, but if I knew he was the same level of shooter as Michael Porter Jr., I would be a lot more sold on Risacher. You know what I mean?
MPJ is a truly special shot maker.
Correct.
Like,
and he always was.
Right.
I mean,
and I think Risacher, as we said, is good, but like not special.
Right. And that's, look, I am not the biggest Michael Porter Jr. fan, but one thing that is like unquestionable is that he's always been a ridiculous shooter, and he still right. is.
And I think because MPJ has that at least one standout bona fide elite trait, shooting off the dribble, from movement, from range, that the rest of his limitations diminish, and he has time to develop and improve. Like, I think MPJ has made pretty commendable strides.
Yes,
He's always going to be somewhat limited, but I think Risacher, where he's always going to be somewhat limited, but doesn't have that really high-end ability at anything, and any one thing to be like, we're going to live with Michael Porter Jr.'s defense and passing, because he's going to make every single transition three we catch to him, no matter, like, and we don't have to worry about warping the defense and eliminating contests for this guy. He's going to, he just ignores them. Where Risacher, I don't have that like trump card thing that Sarr and Holland and these guys have, but again, it is so critical for these top picks.
No, that's I'm glad you brought it up, because it gives me an opportunity. For instance, just to throw the number on it, MPJ is a career 41% three-point shooter on almost 11 attempts per 100 possessions. That is huge volume and huge percentage. And like, look, if you think Risacher is going to be that, then yeah, I'm a lot more sold. I just haven't. That's not available on tape at this point in time. I don't think so.
I think he's pretty clearly a good shooter.
I agree.
He has a pretty substantial sample of being very legit.
I agree.
Like, even though he's like has ups and like, I feel like people always or some people, I'm not saying probably like serious draft people, but like casual fans maybe, or people like, oh, Risacher's been shooting 50% from 3 in the month of December, and then it's Risacher shooting 30 or 25% from 3 in the month of March. Maybe he sucks. It's like, no, when you have, this is just how it goes with 95% of basketball players that aren't this kind of shooter. But when you total it out, like this season, 38.7% on 238 attempts, like that's not a fully stable sample, but it
matters.
And
yeah,
then the last couple of years, like again, the last couple of years he was at like 30, 31 and 32%. And then the year before 35% on much lower volume. I don't think he's probably a 38% shooter or 39 on high volume. I think that's a little lofty, but I do think there's enough track record of him shooting at an NBA level. And another kind of hang up that I have is the shot versatility, which is such an important thing for projecting shooting, because it showcases the ability to impact multiple ways and not really have to have your offense dial in you so much as a shooter. Where Risacher is a pretty solid movement shooter. Like, he can come off of pin downs and screens, doesn't really showcase much off dribble stuff. varying success versus contest. Actually, can you look that up right now? I don't think it's great, but I could be totally wrong. But
No,
that's my
yeah.
my hang up with him again, is that I think he doesn't have the kind of a guy like MPJ, right, who can literally do any kind of shot that you want him to do, whether it's sprint off movement, left, right, forward momentum transition, step back, backwards momentum, like sidestep. It's everything where that stuff matters. And even though it's not going to like be like hezzy isos, it's okay, you're getting closed out at in this way. Do you have an answer? And I think Risacher, like, it's not always going to be yes.
Yeah, and it's not a huge sample size because he's not a huge free throw guy so far, but he's like a low to mid 73 free throw shooter.
Yeah.
That's not a great data point.
And has like pretty much has very little mid range creation game.
Yeah. So I mean, we could keep going.
So,
it's just
I'll say this is normal. This is like, I don't want to like make this sound like alarm bells, but he unyarding catch and shoots this year. He was 43.8%, guarded catch and shoot threes, 35.3. So I think, well, that's still pretty good. Like 35.3 guard is not bad, anything. It's just, I think it's clear that he doesn't necessarily always have the release point versatility and the footwork and handle stuff to always get around contests when he needs to, which is obviously a huge thing for elite shooters.
Yeah, and I do think just generally it kind of just gets, everyone kind of agrees to some degree that he is a good shooter. And especially in these more like, capsule-y, shorter descriptions of him that I've seen on, mainstream places recently. It's like good shooter. Like, okay, yes, that's true. But I think there's a legitimate swing in his shooting of like, if he's great or really, really good as a shooter, that would be really helpful. But if he's just like a pretty good shooter and
he's
with everything else,
be a good player. Like,
well, I mean, I could be a good player, but like in a
not number one good.
Yeah, no, that's what. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I think there's a lot of pathways for him to be like a 4th, 5th starter, and that's a good player. But is anyone going to be happy with that? I don't know.
Absolutely not, right? And I think like again, that's why I've always said, like, I think I've said this on this podcast, maybe for the first time ever, that like floor and ceiling are way more connected than most people tend to think, right? That like high ceiling players usually have higher floors, and lower ceiling players tend to have lower floors than people think. And I think for a guy like Risacher, right, it's like, okay, he's really, really safe in theory, but what if he isn't this shooter? Like, what if he's like a decent shooter? Then he's probably not a very good player. Or what if he can't hold up on defense and he's a good shooter? Like, then he's probably like a one-way version of Risacher, probably not that great.
I do think in general, and we'll stay away from the rabbit hole too much here, but I do think in general, floors for consensus lottery picks are generally understated. I think people, or maybe overstated. I think the floor is usually lower for these guys than people want to say that it is. And this is not a Risacher thing. I mean, for the vast majority of prospects.
And I think for like lower. the really elite high ceiling guys, it's probably higher than people want to give them credit.
Yeah,
but I think that's the case.
It is. No, I think it's a good point you're making that they are more correlated than you might think. And I won't throw comps out there, but look, if you want to be, and I won't do it. If you want to be construct a bust case for him, I could make it. I could see how his floor falls below the world. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'd be kind of surprised. I do think that the most likely outcome for Risacher is that he's a pretty good player. But pretty good players.
He's going to be solid. Like,
anyway, I want to get to Clingan.
I want to quickly say one more thing on Risacher is that for a guy whose main sell is play finishing, he really is not a good finisher at the moment.
No.
Synergy has him at 47.1% on half-court layups. That's not great.
No.
And though he has the athleticism to dunk, and I think his off-ball movement is great. He's a super smart cutter, gets himself into spots to finish. Mm-hmm. He like it's not just the physical limitations to me. It's maybe the lack of like flexibility in the upper body, the lack of like creativity, especially in traffic as well, that make me concerned. It's like, okay, well, if you're like an off-ball 3-point shooter, I probably also want you to be a damn good finisher. And I do think Risacher's ability to rise quickly and dunk does boost that, but that's just one more additional kind of ceiling worry. But I don't want to be so negative about Risacher. Like, he's solid.
I think he is too, and I think in a normal class,
like if the Hawks were picking at 5, I'd be like, yeah, this is like this conversation would be totally different.
I totally agree, and one of the talking points recently is, again, we're recording this midweek. is, the trade down scenarios. And I think that Risacher is going to be gone if they trade down, because the consensus seems to be that he's going to go in the top 2 or 3 somewhere. But yeah, if they were to go to 4 or 5 and get Risacher, sign me up for that. I just don't think that's going to be a huge possibility. And I think in a normal class, if you're looking at him as like a mid to late lottery guy, would be fine. It's just, that's not what this class is. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime, an authorized ticket marketplace at the NBA, and that makes getting basketball tickets faster and easier through the Gametime app. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views and receipts, and the lowest possible price guarantee, it's a fantastic option to make things easy for you at Gametime. I've been a regular user of the app for quite some time now. It's come in handy for me several times in the past with the Braves and Falcons, as well as other shows and concerts around the city of Atlanta. And you can save big when buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and much more. They have flash deals. We actually save even bigger and also save even more when you choose a section. Let them actually choose the seats for you within that section. There's an awesome feature as well that lets you toggle to show the total up front with those surprise fees when you get to the checkout screen, and you get a panoramic view of your seats in the app before you buy them, so you know exactly what you're getting into when you walk into the venue. And you're getting the lowest possible price guarantee with the folks at Gametime. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. Download the app right now. Create an account. Use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Do that promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app right now today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Clingan is, as you might expect, polarizing locally. I've seen every take possible about Donovan Clingan from Hawks fans in the last couple of weeks. Once it became kind of real that the Hawks might just take him at 1, even, people started to weigh in, and that's what happens. He probably, he's not as famous as Bronny or something like that, but he's in the higher end of people know who he is in this class because he was on the national champion.
Yeah, he's been on for 2.
He was a 2-year college guy, right? So people kind of know who he is.
Title.
Also, he's a giant white guy, and that will bring out some takes in general, just without any more context.
There's always something associated with that.
Yeah, so I get the feeling that you're not enthused about him at the top of the class. I could give the more positive. I do believe in his defense personally. I do believe in the defense. What do you think? What do you think? I was gonna say let's start there on the positive side with Clingan, and then we can talk about his offense and kind of what maybe his translation is, because there's also there's this whole weird sub thing that's happening right now about him getting compared to Rudy Gobert, which is logical, but also people that don't like Rudy Gobert saying that's a bad thing. And it's Rudy Gobert is awesome. What are we talking about? But anyway.
Right. And it's also probably not an accurate comparison just because of the difference in mobility. Where I think Gobert was always a special mover, and Clingan is solid and improved there, but not great. And he has a really good, he's another one like Risacher where he does what he does and isn't super special anymore. But I think he does what he does is more valuable. A legit paint protector is more valuable to me than a stationary 3-and-D wing, where Clingan is an incredible technical rim protector. Obviously, just a towering, enormous person, but so good at timing the ball and using his length to get back to plays and moving his hand to the perfect angle to get on a ball. And he'll do this in drop. He'll do this from the post. He'll do this in more mid drop as well. I think one of the big things that moved me on Clingan this year was his mobility improvements and the way that he can now play in space better. One of his big weaknesses to me is still the ground coverage, the high-end mobility stuff that, you don't see elite centers without this anymore. You don't see elite defensive centers without it. It's just not how the NBA is anymore. And I think Clingan got better there. He's much better staying with guards and, chasing them and containing them in mid-ish drop coverage. I think it makes sense if the Hawks want to run a Bucks-ish style drop with him. And then that's what Quinn Snyder likes. That's where he comes from. And I know
and then you get into the Brook Lopez comparisons defensively, which I actually do think are terrible.
He's the wrong guy to be comparing to Brook Lopez. That's Khalil Ware, but that's neither here nor there.
No, I'm just saying that's what you hear. You hear Rudy, you hear Brook, and there's different polls. And I do think that he has, and you mentioned it, he has gotten better with his movement skills. And look,
I want to say that
he has a weird body too.
So I've been working on a defensive grading scale where I try to like assign a numerical value to a bunch of different defensive traits and grade them. And Clingan does extremely well in that system for me, which makes sense because, like, again, I currently have him as the 6th best defender in this class by this scale, which is pretty good, I think. Maybe like lower. I don't know if it's lower or higher than people would expect, but
that's probably. I would probably guess lower. I think generally he's probably seen as like a top 2 or 3 defender in the class. But I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
I mean, the ones I have ahead of him are Dunn, Sarr, Holland, Misi, and Isaiah Crawford. But Clingan,
Ryan Dunn.
The fact that he is an incredible rim protector and got better in like the perimeter and awareness stuff, and just doesn't have any glaring defensive holes, right? Like, he's a good rebounder. He can play make and create events. He's got a pretty good motor. He has good awareness. He's well positioned. He's a solid enough like ISO post defender that I do think the way he fails is definitely like he's not like a can't miss surefire 100%. Basically, no one is. And the way but the way he fails is not defensively.
Well, and for me, failure is interesting with him because I don't know about you, maybe you disagree. I just made the case that most people's floors are lower. I think Clingan's defensive floor is still like NBA center. Like I don't really see him being like not a. How do I put this? I don't see him being a bad NBA defensive player. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like that's not a possibility. Like, the problem would be if he's not great. Yeah. If he's not a good, at least good defender, then he starts to get a little bit wonky with his offense. But I do believe in his defense as like, look, and there is an argument to be had. We touched on it earlier about like, what are you trying to build between title contender, upside, all those things. And like, there are some potential limitations, even if you buy Clingan's defense, to what you have to do with Donovan Clingan defensively. Now, on the other hand, this is what I was saying earlier about making the case around Atlanta. If you're building around Trae Young, you can't run a lot of defensive schemes that Boston runs, for instance. Like, so there is an argument to be had to like pair Trae with a drop. Right. With a drop big who's really good. And
then my counter would be that Sarr can just be that, but better in 3 years.
I'm not even, I think that's a very reasonable point. All I would say. I think it's a good record. It's a good retort. I think that for me, it's always been easier to make the case for Clingan in Atlanta this high than it would have been in a lot of different places because they have Trae.
Yeah, I think it's like fair. And
that on both ends. On both ends,
Clingan to Risacher, like for sure.
I also do. But okay, so that's a good bridge to his offense, right? So Clingan has really great translation numbers offensively. I know, like I saw, Kevin Pelton's stat model, like he does really well. He was super efficient in college, which definitely helps. He was a good finisher. The passing's really good. But what do you think of his offense in the NBA? Like, take away the UConn perfection. Dan Hurley's system was fantastic. All that stuff. Like, put him in a normal situation in the NBA. What's it look like offensively? What do you think?
I think that's kind of the crux of the point, right? Is that I view Clingan's offense as more concerning, right? I think he's a great screener. He's going to be a good finisher. Like, he's not a crazy athlete or anything, right? But he's like a good enough athlete and dunker, and he's long and has pretty good. I think he has. I think his touch maybe has been like a little overstated. Like I think I've seen some people saying it's like elite, where I think it's like, I don't know if I think it's like elite, but it's good. It's definitely
I mean, I think probably because the numbers are so good the numbers are really good. Like all of his efficiency stats are great. Part of that's just that he's so big. I mean, it's worth noting just how massive. I guess because Edie's in this class. I feel like if Edie wasn't in the class, people would talk about how big Clingan is more. Does that make sense?
Definitely possible. He's a gigantic human being.
Who by the way, I was at that. I was at the title game in person, and not to do a Zach Edey jag, but the fact that Zach Edey makes Donovan Clingan look like he's normal size just speaks to how big Zach Edey is.
Yeah, but it's like, but. Again, where it's like Clingan is who he is. He is a play finisher, screener, offensive rebounder. I don't know if you've seen any of my tweets about this, but I am a little skeptical of his passing, and I think this gets at a broader point where I am forever skeptical of Dan Hurley era UConn offensive players. Most players, we say it. Everyone says like spacing is going to be better in the league. translation, offense gonna be better, playing with better players, right? Like it's like Collier, Ron, Sarr, anyone you can think of basically, except for the UConn players, where almost certainly most of them, maybe even Clingan, are going to a situation that relative to competition level is worse than what they had in college. It's going to be worse spaced. It's going to be worse coached relative to competition level, obviously. Not saying UConn is better than NBA team, but
right. But no, it's a good point.
And I think my general issue with that, it's not that, because I feel like that's kind of like a whatever thing, like a tabloidish take. But I think the reason for that is because of Hurley's system on offense that is so brilliantly timed and organized, and they'll run like first into second into third actions like NBA teams do, or even better than some. And I think most of Clingan's passing that I saw was like structured kind of reads that aren't super valuable to me in the modern NBA, where most competent offensive bigs can do that. I remember this conversation like with Onyeka coming out, where it was like he was doing some of these like high post reads, and it was like, oh, he can't really he's not a good passer because he has these learned reads. But I think that's becoming more and more common as more offenses like run through big hubs, that we're like that trend away that we're seeing. And Clingan can certainly do that. But I don't think he's adding a ton of value, like passing into tight windows or doing any high level stuff with vision. And the problem with that is that at the NBA level, right, the windows get smaller, the athletes get better, the timing gets tighter. And when that happens, I don't know if Clingan is going to be this incredible passer where, I think he can execute a system, but Hurley, I think part of the brilliance of Hurley's system, especially with guys like Castle and Andre Jackson last year, is how he erases players' weaknesses. Like is how he just makes them non-issues. And that's always my fear for these guys, in visible and invisible ways, that like maybe there's something we just didn't think about that Clingan never had to deal with on that offense, that, oh shit, he's like in the NBA now. But yeah, that's kind of my pessimistic Clingan offensive player case. But I think he's like probably going to be solid, but I do think there's a sneaky low floor there.
I would, I think all that is fair. I think I'm a little higher on it on the offense than you. And also just I want just to add some Hawks color and look. I don't know if they're going to take him, but as someone who watches every second of every Hawks game, people will note this, that the Hawks started running a lot more stuff through their bigs, even though like someone like Capella, right?
Right, the Hawks
is not exactly
that, like,
not a strength of his, right? Like, but they asked him to do a little bit more of that this year, just out of, because I think Quinn wanted to just see how it would work, because he was used to running. Rudy used to run a lot of DHO stuff in Utah, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there's been rumors that Quinn likes Clingan, and it's not a shock to see why. If you watch, Quinn watching Clingan do that stuff in college is kind of like,
it's a perfect mesh of his old and new, philosophy, his old experience with Gobert, and now his experience with bringing guys out and using these ball skillsy guys. But I will also use that as a point to say, like, basically, it's more rare that starting level bigs cannot do this these days than can do it. Like with a guy like Gobert, like you said, running DHOs, like Gobert is a terrible offensive player, maybe even worse than he used to be in some ways. But he was able to run some of the stuff. And like you said, Capella this year, not a high field guy, not a super skilled guy, was able to execute some basic offense. I certainly haven't watched as much as you did, but
it's just worth noting.
I definitely did notice that in the Hawks games that I caught. So, okay,
the fact that they tried, it was like controversial because they were trying it, and I think everyone knew that like that's not Clint's strength, but Quinn wanted to put more of his system in, so it was like, hey, Clint, you're gonna have to do this. I want my center to be able to do this kind of thing.
And again, I think this is another kind of example of the differing priorities of an organization, where if your priority is, let's get us a player that our coach doesn't really have to think about developing and is going to fit what he wants to do right now, then that'll have pull, right? And
listen, if they draft Clingan, that I'm not saying that's going to be the reason why, but that is almost certainly part of it. If they do.
Right. Exactly. And like I said, I'm not saying that's wrong or like incorrect, just that it's different from the goals of maximizing your championship window, where I think one of the most important things about a championship elite level team is having like bona fide elite paint protection, especially on a Trae Young team, which, I think we've talked about plenty of times over the years about how generally think it's possible to build a title team around Trae. It just takes a lot of diligence. And I think maybe you want to wait for one of these really elite guys. Like I almost think about it as like drafting quarterbacks. Like maybe you want to wait for one of these like game changers. I think in the next coming draft,
Sorry, I had to get my Falcons take off.
I don't want to. I feel like my answer would upset Falcons fans. I recently listened to. I'm sure people will listen to Raheem Morris on the Athletic Football Show. Talk to Robert Mays. That was great.
I heard that as well. Yeah.
But his I feel like his description of the Penix pick did not make me feel bad.
I agree with you, and we'll save that. We'll save the rest of that for later. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and at PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game when watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a lineup at PrizePicks in as little as 60 seconds, which is huge if you're busy like I happen to be throughout the summer, really all year long. All you have to do is pick more or pick less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you are locked in with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. They have over 5 million active members. Get on the daily action right now with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community right now. Basketball means more PrizePicks, so are the star players. You get boosted payouts and select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. And even with the NBA season now over, the hoops action does not stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball stuff, WNBA, etc., is getting started, and that means stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are winning up to 100 times the cash on watching them ball out. PrizePicks is the best way to get on the action in more sports, and honestly, across more than 30 states in the country, and that includes California, Texas, Georgia, etc. And they have quick withdrawals of PrizePicks. You can download this PrizePicks app right now today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for first-time deposit match up to $100. One more time, download the app, use promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there for first-time deposit match right now with the folks at PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Well, I want to make sure before we get out of here that we get to other guys that are not those three.
Yeah, we'll go quicker on them.
If you want to do a Holland pitch, you can.
I'll give you a 60-second one.
I was gonna say I do think just as a general rule, if the Hawks trade down, they might be trading down and trying to get Clingan. But I've said this before. I'll say it again on this show. If you trade down, you cannot trade down and assume you're getting exactly one player. So they have to, if they were going to do that, again, big if they were going to trade down, they got to widen a little bit. And they have brought in guys for workouts. I know a few guys have been in. Modest has been in. Holland's been in. Cody Williams was in, which is interesting. But yeah, go ahead and give your Ron pitch because he is 1B for you, as you said earlier.
I believe that Ron is maybe the highest ceiling prospect in this entire draft. And I think the weaknesses with him are frankly quite overstated, as it's so common for high usage 18-year-old initiators to be like inefficient, where Ron is a legitimately special wing athlete, and that manifests obviously on defense, where he's like will fall asleep sometimes, but is unbelievably locked down, has incredible movement skills, is explosive, is long, is strong. And on offense is a dominant downhill advantage creator with his burst and with his strength and with his great diverse handle that improved so much this year. I think he's a legitimately versatile and creative pick and roll passer, and that can blossom with better decision making, which will come in an easier role. And he's so new to needing to shoot, and I think he made enough strides this year to have me confident enough in him developing a jumper. And again, it's the thing where like, even if Ron never develops a jumper, this is my thing about these guys being safer than they're billed as. He's gonna be impactful as a driver, as a defender, as a rebounder, as an energy guy, which maybe isn't gonna be ended up being a star, but like I think at his floor he'll be Derek Jones. But at his ceiling, he could legit be like a top 25-ish level player as a legit two-way scoring star. And I think that with the risks associated, of course, playing in the G League didn't help him and help his status.
It did not.
But
no, I think just to say it out loud,
that guy.
Yeah, we agree on Ron generally. I mean, I wouldn't have him quite as high as you, but I don't understand why he's mocked in the teens. I don't get that at all.
It's gonna be obvious again. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe there's a reason I'm missing, but and look, the shooting is. I get it. He can't shoot right now.
Okay. I'm not like
I
won't call myself sourced, but I definitely have spoken to people, and it seems like there have been floats about his quote unquote character. Maybe one. I just think that I think we maybe talked about this last time about how overblown like the 18-year-old character things are.
Well, he also always reportedly had great makeup. Like
exactly. I'm saying for everything like I've heard publicly or privately, like he is a psychopath competitively. Works hard as hell. Like maybe like he'll be like off-putting to people, but that seems like a pretty harsh judgment to make of like a teenager you barely know. And an 18-year-old at that, especially
Yeah.
one who's like, it's obvious on the floor that he's like a psycho motor competitive guy. Like, I don't know if you remember like the end of like the FIBA like U17 or something tournament against Spain. It's just like on YouTube where Cooper Flag had like 9 blocks and like 10 steals or whatever. Against Spain in the final. He was like trying to fight people at the end of that game. And it is like on YouTube. It's there. Like and again, like this like that's the mentality I'd prefer than like we were talking about mentality with Sarr and like Risacher a little bit. Like but yeah, I don't know. I think Ron is being well overthought in my opinion.
We definitely agree there. You could go down as far as you want down the board, but do you have? I know you have favorite players, favorite deeper guys that you're higher on. So
I'm trying to think of who we wouldn't have talked about last time.
That's fair. I mean,
we can like.
I
don't think we really did any lottery or like.
Yeah, you can talk about trade down guys. I mean, I haven't talked since the lottery. I haven't talked as much about like Modest. I haven't talked much about Cody Williams, like that kind of tier guy.
Well, because we did second rounders already.
We did, and we also did a little bit of that late lottery mid guy because we thought that's where the Hawks were going to be when we last talked. Which is even then.
Yeah, I do actually like these.
I did like 3 weeks of. I did some podcasts in April, like late April, early May, about like the 10th pick because that's where they're supposed to be, and it's like those became kind of irrelevant, but now they're kind of maybe back to being kind of relevant again.
We'll talk about some of these guys. Modest is. I guess we can do Modest and Cody because they both worked out. Even though I'm maybe lower on Cody and higher on Modest.
That's okay.
Buzelis, to me, has one of the more interesting high-end outcomes in the class where 6'10 guys with his kind of driving creativity and movement skill paired with elite rim protection upside. It's a very unique combination of skills that we just don't see very often. Where Modest, like, I believe in the shot enough. He's great touch, great free throw, great mid-range, was better in high school. Volume is solid enough, like on a terrible team in the G League, whatever, adjusting to the G League line. I believe in his shooting enough to unlock his great driving. He is confident, aggressive, wins with his length and flexibility and ability to bend and get low and create creative solutions. He's just like really weak and can't move anybody right now. Like he is super behind physically again, like Risacher, probably even worse. But he is so skilled. I love his mentality. Defensively, like I said, not like the craziest athlete explosively, but super technically sound, great timing, amazing instincts and like rotations and stuff. And I think again with strength development, could develop into a really good defender. I think again, just like a really interesting upside swing. Hawks fit, kind of talking about Sarr. Offense is going to be easier playing with Trey than it was he had his guards in Ignite were like John Jenkins, Oddmon Gilder, and teenagers.
No John Jenkins slander on this podcast. Hawks legend. Hawks first round pick John Jenkins.
Nobody was passing him the ball. Ron. It was Ron, really.
It was Ron. It was basically as the number one option. No, I mean, I've said this before, but I would encourage people, just for context, to watch G League Ignite for a couple of games between now and the draft.
It is really bad.
Just the way they had to play, the supporting cast. You know, there's some Tower Smith debates out there. I know Josh Loy is like the highest person in the world on Tower Smith. Like it's but no, I like him too. But I'm just saying that they had 3 first round picks on this team, and the rest of the roster was just like a complete disaster. I don't know. It was just I felt bad.
The whole thing with Ignite was that they were gonna build a team with like good veterans, and like they had like when they had like Jarrett Jack and Amir Johnson, it was great. But
yeah, at the beginning they actually did that and they stopped.
You need to have veterans that are like their purpose. It's not like purpose, like but like their skill sets and abilities are tailored to be complementary and not like not like John Jenkins. No offense.
Well, and that's all, and that is why they got rid of the Ignite program, and that's why it no longer exists. That was the last Ignite team. So anyway,
probably I think certainly for the best.
Agreed. Do you like Cody Williams? I mean, you gotta just tease that you kind of maybe don't as much.
I like him more than I used to. I was pretty low, but like I've moved up a little bit because I think there's an interesting upside with him. But even more than Modest, I think like physically underdeveloped. Whereas Modest is a dynamic creator, like with his handle and creativity. Cody really struggles to create separation and to create advantages, and isn't really a shooter. Well, like I think he shot like 40% or whatever on like super low volume. But it was
tiny. Yeah.
He shot 41 threes this year. And he's like a mid free throw shooter, mid like long 2 creator. His touch is incredible. that is his best trait. It is the touch combined with his great movement skills. The fact that he is so incredibly fluid and flexible and fast for a 6'7" guy with a 7'3" wingspan or whatever. And that he can get to his spot in weird ways and finish at crazy angles. Like, his touch is absurd. Like, it is truly crazy. And I think that plus the wingspan can give him like interesting upside stuff. And I think that mobility is also really like evident on defense, where his upside is like a screen chaser on ball guy is high. But in the end, it's like, I don't know. Like, I have worries about what the upside actually is.
No, I actually want to bring this up.
He shot 71% on half court layups. That's like 20% better than Sarr.
Yeah, and I actually saw Jonathan Wasserman say a similar thing. I heard the other day that like a couple of teams in the top 5 or 6 like are in on Cody Williams, and like he might be like a one of those surprising guys who goes higher. And I wouldn't be shocked by that. I'm not super in, but at a certain point in the late lottery, like sure,
yeah,
I definitely understand.
I have him like late teens, but like I would totally understand taking him mid-late lottery. Like, I think it's
I think I have him like 11 or 12.
A good plan and infrastructure, and know that he's not going to be ready for a couple years. But like, if you're baking that in, then that's understandable.
Yeah, he's an interesting prospect for sure. I mean, the one guy that, other than I guess really the only guy I'm looking at the list now, other than like Rob Dillingham, who the Hawks would just can't take for positional reasons. The guy that they haven't worked out to my knowledge, and that has just like been off, is Steph Castle. And I wonder if that's because
they have not worked him out, right?
They have not worked out Steph Castle. And the only thing I think of is, you remember that report around the combine that Castle wasn't going to work out for teams that had point guards? I wonder if the Hawks wanted to work him out, and he said no. Just a guess. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not reporting that at all, but you're muted, Ben.
Hello.
You're back.
Okay.
It's okay.
What I meant to say was that I just don't think it's like realistic. I don't know. Like,
yeah, no, it struck me as odd that he was because they went down below him on the consensus board.
I mean, I don't think he's a point guard, to be clear.
I
think he's a wing.
Me too.
I think he's a wing for sure. I did a YouTube video where I think dove back into his high school and AAU tape, which a lot of people have been propping up like he was this initiator in high school and AAU, when in reality he had like a lot of the same issues and wasn't that great as an initiator. There were more flashes for sure.
He did more of it, yeah.
Always the same problems with like shooting volume and creation in the half court and burst and explosion and ability to create separation. Like, I think he's an awesome connected player, and honestly, he would be sick. He would.
No, I was gonna say I'm the same way. I think if they were to trade down, he would be firmly in play for me if I'm the Hawks. Like, I would be very intrigued by Steph Castle in that 4 to 7 range, whatever it would be at that point, wherever you go. I don't know if they're crossing him off. I don't know if he doesn't want to be here. I don't know why he hasn't worked out, any of that stuff. I'm just saying, in a vacuum, analysis wise, he makes a lot of sense with Trey, in my opinion. I think he makes a lot of sense defensively. I buy everything about Steph Castle.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he's going to be a good player. Like, I guess if he's really like a harmful shooter, right, who like you like leave open, then he's probably not going to be good. But like, assuming
that's the concern. Yeah, I mean, the concern is he really can't shoot it, and he becomes a backup because he can't shoot. And I think he can still be an NBA player without being able to shoot.
Yeah,
it's just
it's like, I think that's unfortunately possible, right? Like, we saw how teams guarded him in the tournament. They just sagged off of him. They just didn't. They're like, we don't really care.
No, he was the one guy. I mean, I literally saw them play their last 4 games. He was the one guy that teams would leave. Like, he was the guy that game planned. Instead of being the game planned off of him. Like, every team that they played against late just decided, we're not guarding you. And granted, UConn was so loaded that they didn't really have a problem with that. And to his credit, he was able to cut and make, he did a good job, I thought, filling gaps. But that might be a preview of what he's going to have to do in the NBA if he doesn't come around. So
yeah, anyway. It's and again, this is the exact same thing with Clingan, where Hurley's system is perfectly optimized to make a guy like Castle look amazing by putting him in situations pretty much only where he's asked to do what he's great at. What he's screening, he's rolling, he's passing on the short roll, he's making connected decisions, he's driving with strength. Like, but that's like not how the NBA works. But I think like if there is a place it might work, it would be Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great fit, honestly.
Honestly, kind of sad if he's like, not if it's true that like not considering because of the point guard thing. It's like
no, I don't know that to be true. I think
it seems true. Like Atlanta,
it's just one of those things where
it secondary wing handler,
right?
Forever.
It struck me as interesting that they, and again, this is Gavoni, what Gavoni reported who's come through, and it was literally like the top, like 8 of the top 10 guys, and the 2 guys who haven't come are Sarr, which has been talked about a million times already, and Castle. Everybody else has come, so we'll see. Anybody down the board you want to mention before we get out of here? I don't want to keep you any longer. But anybody further down that you love that you just can't control your affection for at this point that you want to call your shot on? I think
it would be much better value to take Khalil Ware or Yves Missi in the late teens than it would be to take Clingan at 1. I think Clingan is better than those two, but I don't think it's by magnitudes of 20 picks. I think both of them, while being different players, provide that like tall traditional 5 who can play drop at the very least. But I think Ware and Missi honestly both have like, while probably aren't as safe as Clingan, like Ware has the motor issue. Where has the motor issues and some of the consistency stuff? Missi has some of the feel problems and like the consistency on defense. But Missi is like a freak mover athlete who's like moves like a 6'6" wing, despite being 6'11" with a 7'2" wingspan. Just erases everything. Where can legit space the floor and is like a crafty as hell scorer while being an awesome rim protector. Like I think these two, while being riskier for sure, also have like maybe higher ceilings than a guy like Clingan. So I'm not saying that they're better than Clingan, just that like it doesn't make sense to me to take Clingan at 1 when you can trade down to 15 and like almost guarantee one of those guys are going to be there. Obviously, you can never guarantee when you trade down, but
right, of course. But no, and by the way, I don't think I've talked about Missi at all on this podcast.
Well, we can talk about Missi more.
I like him, just generally speaking, and he may do nothing else, but the way he moves, like you mentioned, I think defensively he's going to be good, and I think he can finish around the rim. And like, it might be a very simple evaluation for Yves Missi, but like I'm saying, look, it will shock me if he's a Hawk because it would just take so many machinations to get to a spot. But and that's why I've talked about him. But I like Yves Missi. I think there's a lot of intriguing, especially at a certain point. I'm not saying take him in the top 10 because there's a limit to what that package probably is going to be.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I just did I apologize for this plug, but it's relevant. I just did a mock on my YouTube channel that might be out when you're listening to this. But I picked Missi in the top 10, so I will say that.
No, and that's nothing crazy about that at all. I just really, as we were saying,
it's not common.
I don't know if I talked about him at all.
It's very uncommon, but
no, I was talking to I can't remember who I was talking to recently that has him as a lottery. Maybe Brian Schroeder. Somebody has a lottery pick on.
I think
lottery on him too.
But
anyway,
but yeah, like the downside with him is real again. But like he has a legitimately ridiculous ceiling that I'm like, if he hits, I will. Like if he hits and we pass on him, I will regret that if I am a GM. Not as like where it's like if you pass on Clingan, you kind of know what you're passing on, right? It's like, okay, we know for sure that when we pass on Clingan, we're passing on like a good drop big who's like going to be could be a really valuable starter. And like, that's something we are aware of. Where it's Missi, it's like, we could be passing on a guy who's legit like game changer on defense with like movement stuff. And he can legit dribble too, which is his other special thing, that he's like a crazy, weird, good, like trader handler for a big too. But yeah. That's my case-ish for
you're in on Yves Missi. I can see that.
It's stupidly in on him. Maybe too much so, but I think there's a chance he's going to be really damn good.
I was gonna say one last call for Ben's guys in this class that we can highlight for people. Even if and look, I've said this, but the Hawks might be able to get in the second round. Like it's not hard to get in the second round if they want to on day 2 and like nab somebody. So I want to have some sort of awareness of who's down there that you might like if you got anybody.
I'm trying to think of anyone who is particularly Hawksy. Not to just make them take all the Duke players, but I think both McCain and Flip would be pretty interesting for them.
I like Flip in Atlanta.
Flip more so.
Again, I don't know how they're supposed to get him because it would just be weird, like the range he's going in. But I tend to like Flip more than people do. I think the question for me is, can he hold it defensively? And I think he can. He's not going to be great, but I think he's like,
yeah, I don't think he's going to be great. He's going to do it. And Flip, I think his offensive versatility is like beyond anything that it's like John, like the John Collins thing, where his whole appeal was like being like a perimeter versatile offensive big. It's going to look very different for Flip, like much less athletic, not more skilled passer type, but being as a super versatile offensive big that can do a bunch of stuff with and without Trey, and like is a passable defender, and he's like a legit 7-footer. Like he is a true 7-footer.
Yeah, I think. By the way, I think in a world where they didn't take Clingan or Sarr, and you could add Filipowski like to Okongwu and Jalen in the front court, that kind of, I think him and Okongwu make sense together. Like, I think just because Flip's a very big power forward, but he's got perimeter skills. Okongwu's, of course, undersized at center. But that's
what I love about him is that he has all this. I think he's the best big man passer in the class, probably. He's maybe the best big man dribbler in the class. But he also has like the traditional stuff, right? Like he can rebound, score in the post, finish, exactly. Like is super physical just overall. And I think that all of that bodes really, really well for him to be a fantastic player.
I am a fan, and you mentioned it, but the fact that he went to Duke, I mean, the Hawks just draft Duke guys. That's all they do,
dude. And so, which means we have to talk about McCain as well, who I think would be like, again, it's like small guard pairing with Trey, but I think they still don't have like an off ball guard. Like, obviously, I think
it's Bogey. I mean, they have Bogey, and he's the only, but he's it.
Yeah,
that's all they have.
Right, yeah. But I was thinking more of a wing, but yes, like it's like that's not what DeJounte likes to do. It's not what Trey likes to do. That is what McCain can do. He is a ridiculous shooter on and off the ball, shoots from well beyond NBA range, always like ready to shoot and catch and organize, can shoot off movement, can shoot pull-ups, like basically everything you want as a shooter, he can do. And he's like a pretty smart pick and roll playmaker. He's strong and stocky on both ends of the floor. Like, not going to be a great defender, but I think he's going to be pretty solid. Whereas I think that's a guy you can afford to play with Trey, especially if you can get like a guy like, I don't know, a Clingan or whoever, or just get really good defensive pieces around. I think he can work.
Makes sense to me. Well, Ben, thank you for doing this. I sincerely appreciate it. As always, you have a lot going on. So you already plugged one thing, the mock thing, but you're writing like 5 places. Please plug it all. Tell people where they can find everything.
I'm lucky to be busy at the moment. I'll say that.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
But yeah, I mean, I'm doing a bunch of like writing and video stuff that you can all find on my Twitter. But the main thing I'm actually going to plug is my live draft stream, where I will be on live during the draft, covering both day 1 and day 2, all of that. We're going to be doing big board and stuff, and I'll have guests on. Hopefully Mr. Brad Rowland will be on the show.
I'm going to try to find a corner of the Hawks practice.
Or if not, maybe on day 2 he'll come and we'll
either way.
But see, it's gonna be fun because on day 1, I want to have like I'm gonna have you, like some other people on, like legit talking about the picks and like whatever reporting there is. And on day 2, I'm like, let's just like say, like name some guys or whatever. But yeah, that's gonna be on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Ben Pfeifer. I do stream on there sometimes now, but like it's such a fun time just hanging out with everyone and watching the picks. And I can't promise you'll like my analysis, but it'll be more in depth than.
No, I definitely recommend it. I keep getting people now that ask me why I'm not going to be live on YouTube during the draft, and I'm always like, I'm going to literally be covering the draft, so I can't really be live in the middle of the room. But people don't care about it. People don't care. The second thing is,
you just pulled your phone in like the media room while the picture.
The thing is, Ben, like people don't care that I'm covering the draft. They just want their own. They want the content that they like, which is I understand.
Brad,
but it's like, I have to go like talk to Landry.
Brad, how can I get you to vlog the draft?
I don't think the Hawks would love that, but hey, they don't love what I say usually, so it is what it is.
You can pull a Matisse Thybulle and and become a vlogger.
Just turn it around, like wait for Landry Fields to come out for his press conference, and then just turn my camera around and just.
Yeah. What's up, guys?
Well, yeah, go really loud.
Okay,
well, anyway, thank you, Ben. People should be checking out your work. You were gracious enough to join me at least once a year, if not more than that, on this show, and I very much appreciate all the time. We could have gone another hour, but it is what it is.
I'm excited for next year.
I mean, you're getting the call at some point during the season, probably during the season and then after the season. As I tend to
wait for next year's draft.
Try to bug you twice.
It's going to be so much better.
Yeah, the Cooper Flag show begins soon, and he's not the only one in that next class. Anyway, check out Ben's work. I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Subscribe to this show, and we'll see you all next time.